I will hand things over to Alexander Easdale, Executive Director of the Southeast Climate and Energy Network, and also one of our advisory board members, to moderate our panel. And this session is going to be a two-parter, with Alex moderating the panel session, and then we're going to have a more interactive audience discussion facilitated by Hannah Trautwein. Did I say that right? Nice. Of SBP. All right. Over to you, Alex.
Thank you, Claire. How was lunch? Yeah? Are y'all sleepy after lunch, or y'all awake and ready? Because we have one hell of a panel here, huh? Do I need to make you stand up, or you good? You know what? Everybody stand up, because I want to give an applause to somebody here who's not expecting, I'm improvising. But I'm brand new to the SCDRP board, okay? And I am totally impressed with the board, but especially with Claire McGrath, who's been doing everything. All right, so again, an amazing panel. So I'm going to basically give a few fun facts about every presenter, but I'm going to go one by one. So instead of reading bios, you know, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to do what Kate did yesterday. But mine are all true, though, all right? So we're going to start with Mr. Rodley Millet of the Lowcountry Alliance for Model Communities. Originally from Haiti, grew up in Brooklyn, I believe lives here in Charleston. A retired Air Force officer who actually enjoys photography as one of his hobbies. So Mr. Millet, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Alex. I've been told I'm a soft-spoken person, so just remind me in the back if you cannot hear me, and I'll speak up. I realized that as soon as I sat down here that I was going to be the first one to speak to Alex. And you know, when you're attending conferences or sitting on a panel, sometimes you don't want to be the first person. But here I am. The name is Rodley Millet. I am the CEO of the Lowcountry Alliance for Model Communities, also known as LAMC, L-A-M-C. We are located in North Charleston, South Carolina. We are a grassroots organization that came about because of the discussion of the port expansion in North Charleston. And a group of us realized that that was going to have an impact on the communities in that area. So we organized and created the nonprofit and have been mitigating and advocating for those communities. Some of our work has expanded to include the state of South Carolina with partnerships with academia and other municipalities and other communities in South Carolina. Our work today focuses on some core areas. You know, environmental justice is one of our key areas. We also work on disaster preparedness and mitigation. We have an ongoing project in one of the communities we support in Rosemount on the upper end of Charleston. Healthy homes and housing resilience is also important to us. Food access. We were trying to actually build a grocery store at one point, but the funding wasn't quite there yet. So we're thinking we're going to get into hydroponic farming as part of that. And leadership and development and resident engagement. Those are all the key areas that we're focusing on at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Rodley. Amazing, amazing work you do. My next victim is going to be Dr. Scott Curtis from the Citadel. And Dr. Scott loves Charleston, been here since 2022, if I'm understanding correctly. His hobbies include kayaking and biking, which is something I do almost every day. So, Mr. Scott, please take it away.
All right. You guys hear me all right? So my name is Scott Curtis. I direct the Near Center for Climate Studies at the Citadel. And I'm going to be talking to you guys about the heat work that's being done here in Charleston. So if you want to jump to the conclusion, you can go to that QR code. That's the Lowcountry Heat Action Toolkit that we developed as a team. The team is called the Charleston Heat Health Research Project, and it is a large group, and I'll talk more about that maybe during the panel session. But just to kind of build up to that and looking at those 3 locations, those are some of the areas that we focused on. Starting with just mapping heat and humidity around the city in 2021 with the Kappa Heat Watch project. That was a great citizen science kind of activity that kind of got things started. Actually, I should back up and say our MUSC, the Medical University of South Carolina, and climate adaptation partners, they were looking at threats to the larger medical campus on the peninsula. And one of the threats they identified was heat, because people that were going to the hospital were not making it outside the parking lot, or they were fainting at the bus stop because of the heat that was in that area. So that led to the Heat Watch activity. And from there, we had, again, through the help of Dr. Mary Coster, got into the local Gadsden Green community to understand about the heat stress affecting them. And then continuing on, we did some other studies related to, and I should mention that other academics were coming into Charleston to research heat. So we had people from UNC Chapel Hill, NC State and Appalachian State. And so it really has grown over the years. So I'll just leave it at that, and I might come back to some of these things later on in the panel, but I don't want to take up too much time at the beginning. But yeah, thanks.
No, thank you, Dr. Curtis. Next is Mr. Tom Frick. I have a lot in common with Tom Frick. He has 2 cats. So do I. Apparently they rule the house. Yes, they do. Also, fun fact, he lives with both of his parents. And as such, he says
I have a
to me-
curfew still, so, you know.
And he told me he likes, as a result, likes to get out of the house, to go hiking and to the beach in St. Augustine. Take it away, Mr. Frick.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for having me. This is a real honor to be here today to talk to you a little bit about what we do at St. John's River Water Management District. So how many people here have been to Florida? Oh, wow. All of you. How many of those, Disney, right? Is that where you've all been, right? Oh, I have a few down. Okay. So anyway, just to kind of geographically, in Florida we have, basically it's state agencies, they're regional agencies that have a wide core missions that we have to deal with. St. John's, as you can see, is in the upper right-hand side there. And we are focused all around surface water basins, and I'm putting that out right now because when I tell you a little story and we talk about this, we're going to talk about the fallacy of surface water basins and how that can impact folks. But basically, the St. Johns River starts down at the very bottom right there in Indian River County and goes 300 miles north to Jacksonville. Yes, that's right. It travels north across the state. And that's the area that I work in. And I mentioned that we have a few core missions, and really our world is a little bit interesting because we're a permitting agency. So environmental permits, consumptive use permits as far as people getting their drinking water, all of that, we do that. So there's a regulatory side to what we do. But we also are out there, we're doing natural systems. So we do coastal restoration, we do wetlands restoration. We also have a lot of, well, 750,000 acres that's really under our purview in that 18 counties that I pointed out there. And so that's like, running your parks and all those fun areas. We do a lot of science, so we have a lot of scientists that go out. We collect a ton of data, and then we convert that data into useful information, whether that's through our modelers or through scientific findings that we help with a lot of the organizations and a lot of our partners out there. So we cover a lot of things, and so my job at the district, I'm the resilience officer, and really what my job is to get all those different areas, those silos, talking to one another. And so I'll talk a little bit about how we do that in our partnerships with local governments and local groups. But that's really kind of what my job is to create communication, but internally between groups and then also externally so we can help. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next is Elizabeth Pigman, or everybody calls her Libby. Libby's an adventurer. Very interesting. She actually grew up in Okeechobee, which is north of Lake Okeechobee, and I grew up in Clewiston, Florida, which is in the southern part, sugar country, and we already know some people in common, I think. She also went python hunting in the Everglades recently, so she can tell you about that. And she drove across France with her daughter, which is pretty cool. I heard, like, outside of Paris, France is much more down to earth, so I need to learn more about that as well. So, Libby, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So we are next door neighbors with St. John's. South Florida Water Management District is very large in scale and scope. We start the headwaters of the Everglades just south of the airport in Orlando, and our district runs all the way from there to the Florida Keys. We support a population of almost 10 million people, and we have 18,000 square miles of land within our district. We also have 57,000 acres of constructed wetlands that we manage as well. So water travels from just south of Orlando down the Kissimmee River, through a chain of lakes, down the Kissimmee River into Lake Okeechobee, and then flows south from there into the Everglades and Florida Bay. There's a tremendous amount of infrastructure in that area that we manage to make it possible for that 10 million people to live and thrive. I am an attorney by training, but my current role is the External Affairs Director for South Florida Water Management District. So I kind of stand at the intersection of science and policy, and the heart of my job is relationships, helping people understand the work that we do, and then answering questions and creating relationships. So.
Thank you, Libby. And last but not least, Mr. Joshua Bryant, who is, Joshua is, with SPP. He's a foster parent. He's an avid golfer, and he's played all over the United Kingdom, and lives in Austin, Texas, and he described this perfect day, which is sitting in his patio with a Mexican martini. And he gave me the recipe, which is a margarita. It's a tequila with lime juice and olive if you want it dirty. So there you go, Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, highly recommend it. Hey, my name's Josh Bryant, as mentioned, with SPP, and I'll tell you what SPP stands for in just a second, but I'm an emergency manager by trade. Got into the field kind of by accident. I was prior service Coast Guard. Deepwater Horizon oil spill happened, and I was told to go to the EOC in Houma. Said, yes, sir. What is an EOC? And where is Houma, Louisiana? But just kind of never got out of the field of emergency management. When I was ready to get out of the Coast Guard, took a job with the state of Texas Division of Emergency Management, and worked there for most of my career, eventually leading recovery programs for the state of Texas. When I got ready to leave Texas in 2024, I joined a group called SBP, which used to stand for the St. Bernard Project, because we started in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina, rebuilding homes in St. Bernard Parish. We still do that. We're still a home rebuilding organization, but we discovered pretty quickly that just rebuilding homes wouldn't make a community more resilient, and so we hired a team of advisors who I'm very lucky to work with, and most of us are prior service public servants in some way, and we focus on pouring training and coaching into low and middle capacity communities across mainly the Southeast, but we do some work in most parts of this nation, and so yeah, really thankful to sit up here today and looking forward to this discussion.
Thanks, Joshua. I appreciate that. Great to meet all of you. It's the first time that we actually met. This is going to be a lot of fun. So let's get to it. I'm going to ask folks. I have 3 questions that you're all going to answer. So answer them fully, but be succinct. I think we have to finish by 2. Yeah. All right. So the first question, we're going to start with Scott and go from right to left. So from your vantage point and based on your experiences, what are the main components of successful partnerships And please give an example related to disaster preparedness and or response to recovery.
All right, well, thank you. I think some of the main components of a good partnership are diversity in your partners, inclusivity to bring in partners that you might not normally think of, and also having good leadership. Because with any partnership, you have all these people coming to the table. There needs to be somebody to kind of make the direction and kind of guide the ship, so to speak. So in the world of heat, I was mentioning some of the projects we're working on with heat, but it's a very diverse group. So we have academics, which I was mentioning some of those before, but we also have people in the city, town of Mount Pleasant, City of Charleston County, Richland County. We extend beyond the city. We've got partners from the Climate Office in Columbia, and also we've got partners in nonprofits and educators, and so that has really expanded what we can do with heat. And one of the reasons that's so important is because heat is such a pervasive kind of hazard, but it is also not really widely recognized, or really don't put a lot of money into that, or even time or attention a lot of times. So the more voices we can have from different perspectives to talk about heat, the better on that. So, and again, I think the nice thing about this partnership, and I should say, as far as the leader goes for this, it's really been Janice Barnes, who's part of the Climate Adaptation Partners, who's really kind of directed our group. And the nice thing about this is that as we recognize certain things that need to be done in terms of heat, whether that's community engagement or whether that's proclamations from the state or the city, we bring in people, and we're very good about doing that. And in fact, if anyone wants to join our CHIRP group, it's an open invitation. If heat is something that's important to you, especially if you're here in South Carolina, that's something that we want to continue those partnerships. So yeah, I think I'll stop there for now.
All right, I will take the next swing. Building on Scott's response, some main components of what I think makes a really good partnership: shared problem, shared definition of success and a way to measure that, and then complementary strengths. So the example I'd like to use is SBP has a program called our Fellows Program, where we hire individuals locally to add capacity to jurisdictions that need some human help. They basically need extra FTEs, and we pay for those positions, but kind of put them on loan for 2 years to local government and nonprofit entities. As we were kicking off that program, we realized we needed to find a partner who could look at the success of the program from an outside perspective and tell us whether or not it was working. And so we partnered with the Urban Institute, who many of you would probably be familiar with, but basically they bring a very clear lens of looking at how successful our fellows are in implementing local policies that lead towards better disaster management practices or resilience practices in the communities they're placed in. And why I think this partnership is so successful is we both are working towards the same goal. We have that same definition of success. We treat each other as teammates, but we definitely have differing skill sets. We have people that are more practiced in disaster policy and the kind of how to do it, and they have people that are more practiced in how to measure and study it, which is a capability we definitely don't have. And so I'm very thankful for that partnership, and yeah, really just kind of bridging strengths together is something that I would say is critical.
Awesome. So I'm going to take the opposite approach. I'm going to tell you what doesn't work for successful communication and partnerships. And Libby and I are going to tell you a little story of how we responded during and after Hurricane Ian that came through Central Florida. And if you noticed on the map that we had before, the Orlando area is where, we have a boundary. And again, that's a surface water boundary. Southern part of Orlando water is supposed to go south into her district. On the north and sort of eastern side is where the St. Johns River, which starts, kind of on the coast, kind of works up and then jogs its way over toward the middle of the state. And in that area, you have 3 large counties. You have 16 different municipalities. You have 2, and if you get a little farther west, you have 3 of these water management districts. So these 3 regional, especially 2 regional groups. And so really what we learned was through this is when you get all those different groups together, and this is back when we were all naive, right? This is, we're coming right out of COVID, and everybody had sort of been in their own bubble, and we were doing things, especially on the emergency management side and planning side, we were doing things well internally, but not across jurisdictions. And so really when you have this density of different levels of government and different partners in there, you need to have something in place to be able to communicate across what's happening in each one of those so that you understand what your neighbor's doing and you know who to talk to and how to convey information, especially during an emergency. So the way not to do it is to stay in those silos because then, really what happens is the community, the residents in that area wind up suffering.
So yeah, I also was part of, I like to call the flood fight in Hurricane Ian. So, when that storm hit, kind of to give you an idea, that was a really odd storm. Storms, they're all a little strange, but a hurricane developed originally, we thought it was going to go up to Tallahassee and it hit the Panhandle. That's where my daughter's a student, so everybody was, trying to figure out how to evacuate their kids from colleges, and there was a lot of what are we going to do about the Capitol being up there? And then it shifted, and then it looked like it was going to hit the Keys, and then it ended up hitting Fort Myers and really did some really, really significant damage to Sanibel and Fort Myers and caused a lot of flooding and a lot of property damage. And then the storm kind of traveled across and just sort of sat over Orlando for a couple of days, and it was a 1 in 200 year storm event. And it was a lot of rain in a very short amount of time in a very flat area. And I remember we kept seeing, I have a friend that lives on Boggy Creek, and just my story, she used to work for the Water Management District, and she was posting stuff on Facebook like, I've never seen the creek this high. This is really scary. How much more water is coming down? And as you guys know, like up here you guys had Hurricane Helene up in the Conway area where the river just kept rising, and I knew this is just the beginning of it. Like the water is going to continue. And so I went up to the EOC and I was like, what are your concerns? Like, what is your modeling showing? And they were like, can we talk about this grant that we applied for a couple of years ago? And I was like, oh my. And so I got our modelers on the phone and I was like, wow, we're looking at finished floor elevations being impacted if we don't take steps right now. And so that flood fight that day started of just amassing everybody. It got I said, I'm going to be back tomorrow morning. I'm not leaving until this is over, but we're going to bring in everybody. I want all of your local municipalities. I want the counties together. I want St. John's. I want South Florida. I want the Army Corps of Engineers. I want your local electeds. And we just started having these meetings first thing, talking about when are these lakes going to crest and how much water can we move. And so that was kind of the beginning of how that month-long flood fight occurred.
Well, as a grassroots nonprofit, our approach includes some of the following, and that's how we've been able to monitor our success. And the very first thing is trust building. You have to build trust. We work with frontline communities in the area and throughout the state. You just don't show up the day of the crisis and go, we're here to help, because they don't know who you are. So we think that's the very first step for us. Obviously, identifying clear roles and define gaps in those so we can fill those gaps. Another thing is the community itself, that they're engaged. And they're not engaged as in an advisory sort of way where we'll ask them questions about something and take the answer and move on. No, they're part of the decision-making also, and that's very key. The data that we gather, the transparency that we show in that information to all of our partners, and then the long-term commitment to make sure that the plan works and it will continue to work and make adjustments as we go along. A perfect example of that is a project that we're working on in the Rosemount community, which is located off of King Street, the northern end of the city of Charleston. And to tell you about the partners, for example, we have the city of Charleston, we have the College of Charleston, we have University of South Carolina, Clemson University. We have another nonprofit also involved in this. And we realize that's a lot of people all wanting to talk to the residents about their issues around resiliency. So we thought it was important for us to get together first and figure out who's doing what, who's bringing money in for what part. And then we wanted to think about the message that we were going to have with the community. So we worked together to design that message, planned a kickoff meeting, food, and it was a perfect day right in their community. And we are now continuing to work on those goals that we have established of what we're trying to achieve, from leadership development in the community to resiliency planning to marsh restoration. We want to build nature-based solutions for flooding in that area. So it requires a lot of people coming together and working together and understanding that these components that I mentioned are all important.
Excellent. We're going to stay with you, Rodley, for this next question and go right to left. Or no, left to right. You're right. Anyways. Yeah, yeah. So one takeaway here, build it at the speed of trust. That's a really important nugget. Reflect on it. It's very important when you build these relationships and even going through the ups and downs. But doing stuff together is a winning strategy. I also want to give a shout out to Dr. Ashley Ward of Duke University, because I mentioned heat over here. I think Scott brought up heat. She presented yesterday, so talk to her because she's one of the foremost experts on the subject. So anyways, I think we're doing good in time. All right, next question, and you partially already answered it, all right? But
Okay.
so what are the main sectors involved in partnerships related to disaster preparedness, response, and recovery? And have you noticed a difference in the tack of collaborative partnerships, the recipe, if you will, in disaster preparedness, response, recovery versus other industries or issue areas?
Well, I did mention some of those partners and understanding what each partner brings with them to the table, and that being well-defined, and that they would be the experts in that particular piece of it. Health agencies are also partners, philanthropy for money. Faith institutions are important to coordinate with because they know the members of their church, and the congregation is part of that community or come from a specific community. And then resident leaders. Some of the communities that we work in actually have elections where they select a community president, vice president, secretary, and so they're sort of the point of contacts for things that we want to do, or if we have an idea of something, we involve them in the discussion. I also have a background, a corporate background and a military background. And in the corporate environment, collaboration with other companies is a very different animal in how you collaborate, and there's a lot of legal issues that you get into, and sometimes it's optional versus being required. So in my experience as a corporate executive, and what I'm doing now, I clearly see the dividing line between the two.
So The question was about what are the main components of successful partnerships? And one of the things as I was preparing for this panel is infrastructure protects. We have a lot of infrastructure, but I like to think of the partnerships as operational infrastructure. And really, kind of a big component of this was that trust that you were talking about. So Orange County is to the north of Osceola County. And Orange County is like the city of Orlando. They're the richer, bigger place. And Osceola County was terrified that Orange County was going to dump water on them, which they could have. And there was a lot of Orange County that is within St. John's permitting area. Osceola County is wholly within South Florida. And so what I first noticed at the very beginning was Osceola County was very fearful of Orange County, and there wasn't a lot of communication between those two. And so bringing those two together with our agencies as an umbrella, and then also with the Army Corps of Engineers, and saying, we are going to be making decisions based on what is best for the watershed. We're not going to be thinking about what's best for the most heavily populated areas or for the area that has the most money. We're looking at getting this water evacuated from these areas away from homes as quickly as possible, and establishing that trust and helping them work through that fear from upstream to downstream community was really important. And like I said, that morning phone call of just giving everybody a briefing every single day of where are we, what are the projections and the modeling looking like for when these lakes are going to crest. And a tool that we utilized in that process was we have a component of our website called real-time data, and we are able to hook people into our system where they can see exactly how much water is moving through every single structure at any given time, and monitor the levels of the lakes. And they knew what the finished floor elevations were, they knew what those lake levels needed to be, and they could monitor. And so we were literally like opening a gate here, moving a little water down, closing that gate, moving a little water down, and every single one of those communities around each one of those lakes were looking at that and going, well, wait, this gate's open. Wait, why did you close the gate? And so we were radically transparent with them. And we also came up with this tool where we did a pump map. We deployed 30 pumps in the area, very large pumps. And those pumps, we were updating those maps all the time. Like green meant the pump was in operation. Yellow meant the pump was being installed. And red meant the pump was on its way, but it wasn't here yet. And we were just constantly showing people, like, this is where we are, this is how much water we're moving, and just trying to include everybody in that and making sure everybody had all the information was really, really important.
Yeah, and so what Libby's describing is, during the storm, right? I mean, this is emergency management, trying to build trust, and how do you do that during the middle of the storm, which isn't the ideal situation, as Rodley was talking about. So Hurricane Ian came through Central Florida in late September, right, of 2022. And there was a lot of this mistrust. As I mentioned, you had not just the water management district, but you had these, 13 municipalities who water flowed through them. And they were all pointing fingers about what was happening upstream and downstream. And even though they all work in the same area, nobody seemed to want to pick up the phone and call their friend or so in the next jurisdiction. And so quickly afterwards, one of the things that both South Florida and St. John's, what we did was in January of 2023, we brought all of those groups together. And it wasn't just the local governments. We brought regional planning councils. We brought DOT. We brought pretty much everybody who was going to be involved. And basically, what we started to do was build trust, right? We started to build relationships. And one of the first things we did in that meeting was we handed out cell phone numbers, and everybody wrote down their numbers and gave that information. So next year, when the storm came, they would know who to call. And this was not just one person, emergency managers from, a specific jurisdiction. This was natural resource managers, this was stormwater managers, this was the emergency management folks, even communications. So we were trying to bring as many people as possible together. First, it was to educate about what happened. So I mentioned before that the St. Johns River runs north to south. It does that except for the times that it doesn't. And it is tidally influenced, and there's 200 miles between Orlando and Jacksonville? Well, guess what? It is tidally influenced all the way up to the north end of Orlando. That's kind of crazy. And why is that? Because the drop in the river is 10 feet over 200 miles. So there's more drop in this room than there is in 200 miles of river on the St. Johns. So it's tidally influenced. There's spots that are, and also when the way that Hurricane Ian came through, where you had winds kind of coming from that northeast, it also will back up. And you can see this actually on gauge data and everything. It backflows in that area. All of that means that we knew in January that people were flooded at the end of September, but it was going to be at least 3 or 4 months before the water receded. So we're talking communities who are living with this flood for a long time. So we needed to educate them about that, because it wasn't just the fact that somebody upstream was still letting water down, or somebody downstream wasn't opening up something to let water, and to relieve the people upstream. There was actual physical reasons why the water wasn't moving. And so we went through that process. We tried to get that out to as many people as possible as part of this group. So that was, I think, key in order for us to really be able to start having these conversations and educating, setting up the communication lines. And so therefore, when we went into the next season and the next season, the response, we weren't having to build trust on the fly. So that was important.
Awesome. I'll choose to focus on the second part of this question about what's different compared to other industries, because I think the types of partners have been covered. But I'm going to focus mainly on the recovery part of a disaster. And so, as you all know, response can be painstakingly fast sometimes, where people can't really get on board with such a quick timeline. The opposite's true almost at the flip of a hat. And so you enter recovery phases, and programs like public assistance through FEMA individual assistance or HUD CDBG-DR program can last decades, sometimes depending on what kind of problems you have. And so the aforementioned trust, being able to go into a community and explain timelines to partners, explain expectations. Oftentimes partnerships are built around which phase of the disaster you're working in. And so making sure you're layering funding correctly and not duplicating funds from different programs. Helping people understand reimbursement processes, which wouldn't exist in any other industry, at least to this level, and the types of compliance that come behind that. And then not really getting to pick your market, which I think is something that other industries don't really experience. An example here would be SBP is a housing organization from birth, like I mentioned earlier, and we have a lot of good relationships in Southeast Texas through Hurricane Harvey and other disasters that have impacted that part of the state. But in July of this year, there was a catastrophic flooding event in Kerr County, Texas, which really hasn't experienced that type of home loss until now. And so it's almost because we didn't have pre-existing relationships there, we had to start from scratch, finding organizations that could provide case management, finding organizations that could rebuild homes, kind of building that trust from the jump, and then explaining how long and painstaking this process would be. And so it's really being as transparent as possible, as mentioned earlier, and then just kind of laying it out and finding people that can be your advocates there locally. That way, hopefully, you're not losing the steering wheel when it comes to local partners, because especially from a government perspective, if you have an elected official that overpromises and underdelivers, that trust is probably evaporated pretty quickly.
All right, great, thanks. Yeah, like I said, with the heat issue, it's a little bit different. It's a sort of insidious pervasive sort of problem that happens every summer, although, again, there's summers that are going to be more extreme than others. But so having that, again, diversity and partnerships, we're not focusing on a particular geography, and it's not like following a major event like a flood or a hurricane. So in that way, it's different. So again, our main, we have several main contributors, but definitely the hospital, MUSC, and also state, local, county governments, federal government. So, for example, Emily is part of the CHIRP. We have National Weather Service. We have NOAA, who sat on these calls before, too. And the other thing I want to emphasize, and you mentioned Ashley, for example, we're not working in isolation. We're trying to partner with other groups outside of Charleston and outside of South Carolina. So, for example, Chris Furman runs the Carolinas Heat Health Coalition. So we're trying to, be part of that so that we can kind of exchange, best practices and adaptation measures between the Carolinas. We're also looking at other cities that are kind of ahead of us, like Miami and Phoenix, that are doing heat work. And finally, the federal government has really stepped up with this issue with NIHIS, and so if you go to heat.gov, there's a lot of resources there. So we draw on all this stuff to really kind of build up a more robust collaboration. And I should say that, again, that Lowcountry heat toolkit, Heat Health Toolkit, is really drawing on a lot of those resources. So it's not like we're creating this stuff from scratch. It's really about partnering with others to really help with this heat issue. And I should say also, United Way, VOAD, these kind of organizations have really been helpful in terms of getting the word out to the more vulnerable communities.
Thank you, Scott. We're going to stay with you for this last question. With time check, we have 15 minutes left, so this hour's flown by. What are lessons, recommendations for individual states and the private sector, academia, NGOs, et cetera, to successfully manage disaster preparedness, response, recovery in the context of, I'll just say, potential rollbacks from federal funding?
Start with me?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, again, this has been a challenge. Fortunately, we did get some initial funding from NOAA to do some of this work, to do a pilot project. We were selected as one of 4 cities. I mentioned Phoenix, Miami, and Las Vegas was the other one. That really got us started in terms of looking at doing some research, doing some community outreach. So we've done some tabletops. We had a tabletop exercise actually held at the Citadel a couple of years ago. And then from there, we developed some additional partnerships with Charleston County in rejuvenating their roadways and doing some studies on looking at heat coming off the streets and sidewalks in the East Side neighborhood. So again, if that map was back up, that was one of the locations on that map. A very hot area of the peninsula. I don't know if the tour went over there, but that's by the one of the ports, and so a lot of asphalt, a lot of retention of heat over there. Not a lot of trees. So now that funding has kind of gone away. We're really kind of shifting towards maybe more small scale but effective means to try to get people, real help during the heat season. So one thing that CHIRP is doing right now is working on getting cooling kits, and in fact, the county and the city have stepped up to provide money to either create or purchase these cooling kits that then can be distributed. So, each heat season, we're trying to elevate this as an issue and doing the small things that we can do to maintain that momentum, because heat's not going away. And that's one of the things that's different than a flood or a hurricane, because they're, periodic, right? You get one and then it's gone. But the heat, every summer it's hot. And so we have to be prepared every summer to do something new and different.
Awesome. The Fellows program I mentioned earlier was kind of founded out of an abundance of funds tied to the BRIC program, and obviously that was rolled back a little bit, and so we've also experienced a time period where we need to get creative as far as where we find funding sources. Some of that's come through in-kind capacity adding, like I said, just having somebody in place to help with things like EOP writing, running tabletop exercises, being an extra butt in a seat in an EOC. But also, we're adding more than just people capacity, and I think this is where I think there's some room for growth as federal funds is starting to be rolled back. The formalization of partnerships in writing, I think, is extremely important, like hardwire public-private partnerships into things like EOPs and hazard mitigation plans, into finance strategies, into more than just a project-specific view, but kind of what is your long-term goals as a community, and like how to bring in partners beyond just government or nonprofit into the disaster space. And then really professionalize the grant and compliance management when you get funds. And so these programs are hard to navigate, but they haven't completely gone away. And so making sure that when you do receive funding, you can keep it, understand what the rules of the road are to use those funds effectively, and then kind of how to stretch that dollar. And that's more than just the grant recipient. And so in the emergency manager's case, if they get public assistance funds, it's more than just the emergency manager that needs to know how to navigate the public assistance program. It's their internal auditors, it's their finance staff, it's the people that are actually out on the road rebuilding bridges that needs to document certain types of works. It's your contractors, it's everyone from top to bottom. And so really get good at keeping your money, and especially as it becomes more restrictive, I think that'll be valuable for your internal uses, but also like your ability to access those things in the future as well.
Awesome. So since the beginning of 2023, we've had these meetings, these local meetings, twice a year. We do it prior to hurricane season, so we try and do it before everybody, starts doing their tabletop exercises in May. We learned that because in 2023 we tried to do it before June 1, and everybody was off, doing their own thing. So we ended up having to do it after hurricane season had started. But we try and do it before, we do it afterwards. And really the importance of that is everybody gets to tell their story at, what's important, what are they looking at for this upcoming year, or lessons learned if it's after the hurricane season. But also, and this gets to the funding side, we talk about prioritizing and what projects, whether they're stormwater projects or resiliency projects or infrastructure projects, large ones, what are the priorities in this area? What is everybody prioritizing? What do they want? What do they need? And that allows us to do partnerships, especially when you're at the water management district level. When we're at a regional, if we didn't have these meetings, we might not know what was important to Osceola County or to Orange County. Certainly there are projects now that are important down in Osceola County and in South Florida Water Management District that I know and we know as an organization are incredibly important to the region, right? I mean, they trump some of the other projects that we have and the other ones. So we can actually advocate for that. I mean, we can be a partner in that because we know as a region, it's making the entire region much more resilient. And so that having those additional partnerships really line you up, for funding, whether it's state or federal funding, and also being able to show that there's a much larger impact than just this one municipality or this one entity. These really become transformational. So I think those partnerships are really key.
Well, that was really good, Tom.
Woo!
Funding environments change, but hydrology doesn't. And one of the things that we've done, I think, really well in Florida, we have a really strong statewide Office of Resiliency, and we're kind of working at that macro level, but then also at the micro level with the local mitigation strategy groups in the individual counties. And we're taking data. We have a lot of data. We've really increased our monitoring station. And one of the things that we did after Hurricane Ian is we're kind of crowdsourcing flooding data. So we have tools where people can report flooding. And in the tool, it says, is this tidal related? Does it happen every time it rains or only sometimes? Is it knee high? Is it hip high? And those are things that we're using to really give data-driven decision making. And I think that is really helping and treating the public as a stakeholder just individually in those conversations. So yeah, I think just using that data to strengthen the system has really been critical.
Yeah, this is a topic close to my heart as a nonprofit, because we are living the reality right now of tightening the federal funding. Quick examples are LAMC was awarded $500,000 to do some resiliency work, and we received a letter telling us that we were no longer getting that money, even though the agreement has been signed. We have partners that have lost $1 million. I have another partner that's lost $11.4 million after the agreements have been signed. So we're living the reality. So I'll begin with, it's all in the planning. And in this situation, I think that states and local systems need to step up and become more strategic in their planning and work more collaboratively. I made even notes about this because I felt it was so important. One of the things is to invest in the local capacity. I mean, look around you and see who's doing what, and how can we support those efforts. Small nonprofits, neighborhood groups, are normally underfunded, but they're like your first responders in some cases in response to disasters. So fund organizational infrastructure, support staffing and operational capacity, and invest in communities. The other is diversifying the funding. We can't count on just one source of funding. A lot of us got in trouble. I have other partners who've had to reduce staff because of the environment that we're living in. So we have to be able to diversify our funding. Public-private partnerships, foundations, micro grants, corporate partnerships are important. And for us at LAMC, we leveled that field through mitigation funding, and foundation funding, and corporate funding. Community-led preparedness. It's got to move from the top down response planning to neighborhood-based. And the people in the neighborhood know their communities. They know what they're dealing with better than anyone else. When I first started working with LAMC and talking to communities, I listened. And I asked questions. I didn't make any assumptions. So it is, for us, leadership training in the communities are very important. Environmental literacy. We just started a program called the Community Health and Leadership Academy. We had our first module 2 weeks ago. It's a 10-month module, 10-month program for residents in the communities we serve. To help them build those leadership skills to understand environmental justice and what that means in their community and what it looks like in their community. Build cross-sector compacts. Again, sharing data, clarifying roles are very important. Try to reduce the duplication because it's really a waste of money. if we're all trying to do the same thing separately, we're having a very small impact. But if we can collaborate and bring all of those resources together, just imagine what we can accomplish. There's the pool of resources and just increase speed during the response. It's all in the planning, as I said. you got the planning set, then you're ready to execute when the disaster hits. But if you're trying to do all of that during a hurricane, forget it. You won't be successful. And there are probably going to be areas that are not going to get served at all.
Thank you, Rodley. Sometimes you do something smart without realizing it. I think you did an amazing job closing us out. I'll give a reflection because I never introduced myself. So I lead a network. The Southeast Climate and Energy Network is an 84-member network with a footprint in the entire Southeast and in Puerto Rico. We have also struggled with funding, and we have groups like this gentleman right here. You should be a member of SEN. We should talk offline about this. 60% of our members are grassroots organizations that are working at the community level, but we play at every level, whether it's locally, statewide, regionally, nationally, and even internationally. And the funding landscape has been very challenging, especially for the past year, for 80% of the organizations that are part of our membership. So happy to talk to anybody about that and look to partner. I am personally very impressed with this network. I'm brand new here, but anyway, so just give this group, this amazing panel, a round of applause before we go into the Q&A. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Our panel is going to stay up here for a few moments, and thanks again for this incredible discussion. I am Hannah Trautwein, and I have the pleasure of working with Josh at SBP. I actually lead our Fellows program that he mentioned, where we place individuals with local governments for 2 years. And what I've learned in the around 4 years of the Fellows program existence is a lot of what we talked about today, that partnerships with those local governments and nonprofits, they're everything. They make our program successful. They make the best use of the resource that we give these areas, and hopefully those fellows are actually able to make big change in communities when we all work together. So in the spirit of this panel, and for the next 30 minutes or so, we are going to get a chance, hopefully at the end, to ask this panel some questions. But we really wanted to open it up to hear from you all. We're stronger together, and so we wanted to hear some unique partnership opportunities that you all have as you heard this panel that you were thinking of, like, yeah, this really worked, or I wish that this had gone a different way. I could share best practices with others. And as Alex made you stand, I'm also going to make you stand, and we're going to kind of get the wiggles out for a second here and do something new in the spirit of partnerships. New, hopefully fun, and something I've never done before. So with that, will you stand? And we need to create kind of a middle part of the room. And we're also going to use our lungs and our voices for a moment here. As we get started, first question, by raise of hands, is anyone's birthday today? No? Was anyone's birthday sometime this week? I know a woman in the room whose birthday was on Sunday, and we don't have to point her out, but her name is Michelle. And so this side of the room, our right side, we're going to sing Happy Birthday almost exactly like normal. So y'all are our normal group. Our left side of the room, you're doing something very interesting. Okay, so this side's going to sing Happy Birthday to you, and you will echo to you. Happy birthday to you, to you. Happy birthday, dear Michelle. Oh, we're going to do that all together. Happy birthday to Michelle, and then happy birthday to you, and many more. Okay, are we ready? I'm going to start on this side of the room. Do we understand happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, to you? Everyone, happy birthday, dear Michelle, and then happy birthday to you, and many more. Okay, we're partners here. Let's see how it goes. Okay, happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Everyone, happy birthday, dear Michelle. Happy birthday to you, and many more. Wow, thank you. All right. Yeah. Rodley thinks we need to know who Michelle is. Michelle, say hi. Now in the aftermath. Okay. All right, as we settle back in, we have a few Mentimeter questions. Claire, are we ready for those? We'll see if Mentimeter is our friend this afternoon. Not that one. Those are, 36 questions. Wow.
They're
Okay.
from throughout the.
Okay. I don't think we're going to
They're
get to
not.
all of those. We have some questions for you all, if we can get to them. Okay. So first question, how important would you say partnerships are for completing the work that you currently do on a day-to-day basis? Okay, we're off to a good start. Okay, we're gonna wait for at least like 20 responses. We're getting somewhere. All right, we're still 100. For the work you do every single day, you need partnerships. Okay. I like the honesty. All right. Can I press next and it'll go? Oh, you got it? Perfect. Okay. Yep. Next one. Are most of your projects completed with the support of your internal team at work? Or are most of your projects completed with a team external to your organization? I know this is hard. Most is in all caps. All right. Yeah, interesting. Sometimes partnerships on some projects are very internal. We still have to have really good teamwork amongst our group and the group that is within our network. Okay, and Claire, we can go to our last one. All right, and who would you say are, again, your main partners? Are you mostly working with other government partners, nonprofit partners, academic partners, the private sector, or someone that I left off? Not very partnership of me, I'm so sorry. Main partners are between lots of governments, kind of half and half in nonprofit academic. Very cool. All right, thank you. As we finish up the Mentimeter, I want to send our first question off to one of our steering committee members. I've had the pleasure of sitting on the steering committee for this panel with Jazz and with Alex, wherever Alex went. And Jazz, as we start to hear from the audience, just want to throw this one out to you. Introduce yourself quickly, and then I'd love to hear what you think your most critical partnership is.
Yeah, Jess Watts. I am with a number of organizations, but I'm from Sapelo Island. I work with SICAR, Sapelo Island Cultural and Revitalization Society. And yeah, as far as critical partnerships, I would just say community, community, community. As we're, talking about, these disasters, these events, whether they're natural, whether they're man-made, central to all of this, I can't emphasize enough, community, just with a lot of the things Rodney was saying, when talking about, coming up with these projects, these proposals, is the community at the table, are people at the table when you're talking about reviewing proposals? Are the right people at the table when you're doing these proposals? Are they being included? Are they being invested in? Because a lot of these areas that are vulnerable, when I think about the work that we're talking about, aren't vulnerable by accident. They're vulnerable because historically there has been disinvestment in those spaces. And so now when we're talking about doing the work and talking about investing in those spaces, we have to make sure that we're centering and remembering the community, the people. Collaboration is hard. It is challenging work. It is a bumpy road at times, but you have to be willing to really, truly, authentically do that work and understand also that there is a history that's there. There is pain that is there, and that is not by accident. And we have to recognize those things and recognize that, in our roles, we can be a part of that history, and nothing is wrong with that as long as we're transparent, as long as we acknowledge it, as long as we see that as the reality that is in front of us, and we keep centering the communities and centering the people in all of the decisions that are being made when we're doing the work from the inception to the end, to the beginning again. So.
Thanks, Jazz. Thanks so much. As we ask questions, I'd love to especially hear from folks that haven't gotten a chance to be on a panel or a presentation, so we make sure that we hear a little bit of your story. I'm going to start with some of our government partners, since this was kind of surprising to me. Actually, your main partners are in government partnerships. It's surprising to me because I've worked for the state of West Virginia before in a long-term recovery grant, CDBG-DR, and I wasn't mandated to really work with any creative partner. It wasn't enforced, it wasn't asked of me, and so I think I'd love to hear from one of our government partners. Tom mentioned that with more partners, more creativity, more funding, and so someone who's currently working in government, tell us a bit about why it's worth it. If it's not mandated that you necessarily work with others on a project, but we know more creativity, more funding could come your way. Can you give us an example of, although it might not have been mandated, why a partnership was really crucial and in your best interest and in the best interest of the community? Any of our government folks willing to give this a go? I see a county, Chatham County. I'm from Savannah, so sorry, I'm going to pick on you a little bit. Any thoughts?
You want a microphone?
Right.
So yeah, with government, emergency managers are jack of all trades and master of none. So having people that truly know what they're doing and truly are the experts is always great. So having that diversity of thought in the room to kind of bounce ideas around, at the end of the day, you just wind up with a much better product because you have those different perspectives and you know you can learn from one another. Maybe you've tried things in the past that have failed, but you know, having those lessons learned, you can incorporate into any different projects you have. So definitely appreciate those diverse perspectives.
Thanks. All right, our next question is really for anybody. Dr. Scott mentioned that good partnerships are inclusive. And when I was thinking about a fun activity, hopefully it was fun, to do with everyone today, I thought, man, this is kind of creative, but I've never conducted a group of people in an auditorium before. I mean, when's the last time someone sang a song in the math and science building at the school? But it was a bit creative. It got us all working together. And so I would love to hear from someone about a creative partnership that in the beginning you might have thought, I don't know if this is going to work, but we've got to try it out. Anything come to mind? Nonprofits, governments, academia working together? Claire's gonna call on somebody. Oh no. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi. So I don't want to speak for Dr. Mary Coster, who was on the panel our last session yesterday, but in getting to speak with her about some of her work, she has done a lot of spanning bridges between the arts and creative world into the science world. And so a lot of her work with students has involved creating music and poetry and things like that to be able to kind of engage a different part of the brain or like teach them different learning processes, which isn't something I see a ton of in the natural science world. So I thought that was a really cool lesson, and we talked a lot about that in our semantics breakout in our lunch and learn, and how people kind of learn differently by using different methodologies to kind of get things to stick in their brain and understand different perspectives. So I thought that was really cool.
Thank you.
No. I just sang for you, and happy birthday.
Thank you. All right, I think I just have one more question, and then maybe we'll open it up to our panelists for the Q&A and the mentee. I'd love to hear, academia is a place that I think is sometimes overlooked in partnerships. Ashley told us yesterday, thinking about the science behind what she does at the Duke Nicholas Institute, she was talking about not everyone in that world is good at actually communicating the research, but that's an area that she really likes to sit in herself. So for our academic partners in the room, where do you love to be asked to plug in? For those of us who maybe haven't worked as much with our academic partners, whenever you have someone reach out to you, you're like, yes, thanks so much. Or you need to remind people to reach out to you in a certain way. Any examples of where you really love to be called on to share your research?
See, Dan, I was going to pick, or we've got a lot of academics that we can pick on. We'll start with you, Maddie, and then can we take two?
Yeah, I think so.
I would say convener of stakeholders is something that's not well recognized and a real power. And coming out of that convening, kind of lifting up gaps for institutions who cannot speak on those gaps alone or at all.
Yeah, really good one. SVP is a nonprofit. Even we've been asked to be a convener in Mobile, Alabama, because the city government really wants to get people together, but as the local government, they don't feel like they can send the invitation out to other nonprofits or academics because it'll feel mandated in that way. And so leaning on nonprofits or academic partners is a really great way to do that. Thank you.
Well, Maddie stole my answer, but I think inherent to the university is to bring unity to the diversity. So to assimilate all of the partners and players and be that convener to facilitate that. So maybe that's easy to remember, right? To bring unity to the diversity with your local universities.
Yeah, love that. Anyone else? Okay. Claire, how do we, yeah?
I was just gonna, as an academic up here, but at the Citadel, which is a small college, I mean, anybody that's in that kind of environment, it's almost a requirement that you have to find those partners to advance not only your research, but who's going to be using your research, and again, more hands make easier work. So I just want to put that forward.
Thanks. Yeah. All right, for Rodley, what has communication and collaboration looked like when working with local emergency management and other local or state government agencies in your role?
It's funny to try to step away from that and look at it. Most of the time, I'm in the middle of this, so let's see if I can give you a decent response to that. The collaboration and the communication part are ongoing. It starts somewhere. It starts with an idea. It starts with an issue, a problem that's been identified, and then understanding who should be at the table to have the discussion about what the problem is and what are potential fixes for that problem. And it doesn't happen in one meeting either. This is ongoing because sometimes we speak our own language. Whatever it is that we do, we have our own acronyms. And when we're talking within a group, people are just like, I don't know what that means. So the communication is very important. And sometimes you have to repeat yourself before everybody goes, I got it. So it's patience and making sure that you have consensus at the end.
Thank you. All right. Is this for anyone? Extreme heat, so we're looking to you. Can you address the role of community-based not-for-profit in preparedness education in partnership with local government, such as for events like extreme heat?
Yeah, I'll just use the example for Mary Coster, who's mentioned before. With her, she's got kids teaching flood resilience. She stepped up in a big way in helping to connect us to the Gas and Green community, to educate them about what we were doing in their community for that field work, and to bring in community partners to actually participate and do some of the citizen science on that. So that is, we have been working more lately, and I mentioned this, with some nonprofits like United Way to try to, again, elevate this issue of heat, because a lot of people don't recognize it as really something to be concerned about. But if you talk to a lot of the doctors at MUSC, I mean, they're seeing that it may not be documented as a heat illness, but there is definitely a relationship between morbidity and mortality related to extreme heat. So we're trying to use those nonprofits to reach the community members to say, look, this is something that's going on. This is how we can help. This is ways that you can help mitigate your impacts from extreme heat.
Yeah, thank you. All right, probably have time for 2 more. Can you share a collaborative framework for partnership development that works in your resilience work? So any of our folks maybe in the middle of the table, a collaborative framework that you have seen work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in, and it's, basically what I've been talking about, during this panel, which is trying to, under the blue sky, scenario, or at least, before the emergency, of bringing as many folks together as possible and trying to work through whatever the issue is. I mean, just by a show of hands, how many people here, when you've been working on a project or something, that it was the engineering or the science that stumped you? You couldn't move forward because you didn't have the science or the engineering, right? Mm-hmm. 1. How many of you couldn't move forward on your project because you didn't have community support, or you didn't have partners, or you didn't have more than one? So, so I think one of the things is, realizing the space we work in is very much about trust and about relationships and bringing as many folks together as possible. And the more you can do that, the earlier you can do that, the better off you're going to be in whatever project or whatever effort you're dealing with.
And Josh, I'll put you on the spot a little bit here. I know Texas is out of the region, but share a little bit about how you saw the framework in Texas work when it went all the way to locals, but also COADs, VOADs, really strong long-term recovery group, all the way up to Texas Division of Emergency Management.
Yeah, I would say it probably started with somebody that was willing to serve in a leadership role and give direction, and then that direction be forceful to the point of make sure you include partners. And so I say that to say this stuff doesn't happen by accident. Like, collaboration isn't something you fall into. Like, somebody needs to be a decision maker and serve in a leadership role to say, I want this because, or I'm trying to solve this problem and here's why. And here's who you should start working with, and feel free to expand that partnership as needed. But somebody has to be willing to kind of set and take the first couple steps. And there were people, and not just Texas, this happens everywhere, but people willing to serve in that role, even sometimes when it wasn't the right thing or we didn't end up in the right solution, somebody was willing to take that first leadership step.
Yeah, I love it. Doesn't happen by accident. And Tom, you mentioned earlier, like, people being willing to pick up the phone and make that first step toward partnership is everything. And so I think kind of some reflection for all of us. Are we willing to be the person to pick up the phone and take that first step? If you see a gap that should be filled and you have an idea, how can we, push that forward ourselves? We have time for maybe one more? Okay. All right, and then how do you all build relationships with communities when they are in burnout and fatigue, participating in engagement and involvement activities and events? This is a really great question, and I think as many of those who want to answer, please go ahead. Rodley, you want to?
Sure, I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
That's, well, the communities we work with all have a history. And we need to understand that history, because that history impacts the behaviors that you see from them. So that going into a relationship, you need to really try to figure out what that history is, and what they're telling you is very important to them. I think that I mean, these communities they deal with burnout every day. Every day. We're talking about low income, we're talking about environmental justice communities, we're talking about communities that are not at the top of the list for resources. And so they're dealing with life. And if you understand that going in, I think it'll help you better interact with them.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from our panel? Any other thoughts? Oh,
Yeah,
here.
just,
Yep.
I mean, one last one, and actually went back yesterday. My biggest take home from the last couple of days, which it's been fabulous, but was the statement, you know, don't bring me facts, you know, let's lead with incentives, right? And so the way you get engagement is find that common ground, find those incentives, and work off of that, because if you can find that, then people are willing to, you know, work through the fatigue and spend the time and work on things. So to me, that was the biggest one.
Yeah.
Incentives first, right? I love it. It's like an economist, you know, telling you
Yeah.
how people react.
We've got a hand up. Yep.
I think the incentives makes a lot of sense. I've had people just say to me, if this is not going to save somebody's life, I don't care. Because I'll take your, you know, monetary incentives and all of that, and I'll tell you what you want to hear. But if this isn't going to save somebody's life, who cares? And one of the things that I encourage folks in government, academia, who are perpetually doing this kind of engagement with communities is, first of all, are you really doing engagement, or are you just doing outreach? So where's the power balance? Does the input that they give actually make a difference? And then the second thing is to see yourself as mutually responsible for all of, I don't care if you're the Division of Mitigation Services and that program was in the Division of Coastal Management. You should be somebody who comes in and takes a certain amount of ownership when communities come to you and say, well, like, how is this related? And a simple way to do that is just to show up with a one-pager that, to your point, sir, is I've done my research. I can show you that I know all of the other engagement activities that are happening here. And yeah, it's not my program, but I still work for state government, and therefore have some responsibility as opposed to just kind of doing the CYA thing that most folks tend to have to do in the public service.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else? Yep. Hand in the back.
Yes.
Thanks so much, everybody. Claire's going to be so proud of us. We are ending 2 minutes early. What an incredible hour and a half. Thanks to our panel.